For our last speech of the class, we will be doing a persuasive speech. As you know, this is one that we have been working on throughout the whole semester. But I want to talk to you not just about how to put together this speech, but about persuasion in general. I want to look at the different views of persuasive speaking and some of the responsibilities we have both as the speaker of persuasive messages and the listener of persuasive messages. As you can imagine, we are constantly being inundated with persuasive messages, and it's important that we understand how to respond to them. So we'll begin by talking about some different definitions of persuasion, some different views of persuasion, if you will. The first view is what people will refer to as hucksterism. This is viewed as a skill that people will use to manipulate people. It's also often associated with propaganda. To be honest, much of what we're seeing in our media right now, much of the talking heads that we're seeing, really are exercising this skill. There's an attempt to manipulate you as opposed to persuade you honestly and ethically. I'm not saying the media is doing it, I'm saying the people that they have on there are doing it. Perhaps the media is as well. The other form of persuasion, and this is the one that we should be practicing not just in our speeches and in when we're persuading other people, is what would be referred to as the rhetorical tradition. This is where we attempt to change the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of people using words and symbols. And in this case, the audience are willing participants in the persuasion. The audiences know that they're being persuaded. And like I said, this is what we should exercise. We shouldn't try to manipulate people. We shouldn't, make up stories and things like that in order to get people's reaction. I once had a student who thought that my task in public speaking was to teach people to talk like they did on television. And I said that's absolutely not the case. You should not be able to say just whatever you want in order to manipulate people. You need to do that ethically. So in order to do that, we need to first then look at some of the requirements of the speaker, of any kind of speaker of a persuasive message. There are some ethical concerns that we have to practice when we are up there persuading people. The first responsibility we have is to take communication seriously. Understand that there are consequences to every act. You may recall a news story that popped up during the political campaign. It was a story about how there was a supposedly Hillary Clinton was running a child trafficking ring out of a pizza place in Washington, D.C. And this was reported on blogs and in some questionable news sites, and it got to the point where someone believing these stories went in and tried to shoot the owner of this pizza store. While the person who went into the pizza store is obviously responsible, there is a responsibility of the blogger who put out this message saying that this was going to happen when in fact it wasn't true. So the next one is that the speaker needs to foster an informed choice. This is something that's kind of sometimes hard for us to do as speakers because we want to persuade people. We want them to see our way. But an ethical speaker will provide the audience with enough quality information that they can make the best choice for them. I always believe that if your choice is right, there is going to be solid evidence to support that, and you won't have to ignore evidence that doesn't support it. Next is that you need to appeal to the best in people, not the worst. We'll see plenty of ads and political campaign ads that talk about, people appealing to people's fears. One of the most famous of these is the Daisy commercial from Lyndon Johnson. If you have a chance, go do a YouTube search for that and watch that particular commercial. Another favorite of mine is one that's called A Bear in the Woods. It's a Ronald Reagan commercial, which also appeals to people's fears, which is not necessarily a positive way of doing it. If you want to look at a positive appeal to emotions, appealing to the best in people, I would recommend looking at a political campaign commercial for Ronald Reagan in 1984 called It's Morning in America. Go to YouTube and search for that, and you'll see what I'm talking about with all these positive symbols of American values. Okay, there's also responsibilities that you have as the receiver of a message. We have to be good consumers of information. So the first way that we are good consumers of information is that we have to be aware of the persuasive attempts surrounding you. Understand that there are persuasive messages constantly. You look at people's clothing and they're persuading you. You talk to your friends and they're persuading you to perhaps see things their way. Think about when you and your friends decide to go out to eat. There is persuasion, as one person wants to go one place and one person wants to go another, and they come up with reasons why you should go to a particular restaurant to eat. Next is that you need to inform yourselves on important topics. If you have to make an important choice, you go and you learn information about that choice. Think about if you've ever purchased a car. You don't just walk onto the car lot and say, I'll take the pretty red one. No, you go and find information about that. You pull up the reports about that car, the history of that car. You will go do research about that car. Maybe you'll go to like Consumer Reports or things like that to understand if that car is going to work for you. We need to do that on all the important choices that we make in our lives, be it, what our choice of major is or who to vote for in a particular election. Next, you also have to know your own biases. Sometimes people don't recognize their own biases because they just see them as truth. But you have to understand that on certain things, what you see as truth might not be what another person sees as truth. You will understand this if you ever talk to someone who disagrees with you on certain social issues, like whether or not a woman should have a right to an abortion, or how you feel about same-sex marriage. Those are the kind of things that until you talk to people about it, you don't realize that you have certain biases. And they're not always such serious biases. For example, I hate cilantro. I recognize that that's a bias of mine. I think it tastes like soap. But other people love cilantro. Does that mean they're wrong? Well, no, not really. It just means that they like cilantro and I don't. And then the last thing to be aware of, and we will talk about this more in future lectures, is to be aware of persuasive ploys. Understand that people will use different tactics in order to persuade you, and you have to know what those are, and then you have to recognize when they're being used against you and kind of inoculate yourself so that you're not unnecessarily influenced by them. But again, I said we'll talk about those more. I hope that gives you some understanding of the introduction to persuasion. If you have any questions, of course, you can always let me know.